A very good afternoon to everybody present in this platform. A very good afternoon to all the grade 12 teachers in the province. A very good afternoon to learners, if there are learners currently in this platform. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our online lesson presentation. By now you should know this is one of our strategies in the province that we are using, and it's per subject and by subject. So today is scheduled for our subject. And as you got the invitation, this is going to be focusing on grade 12, and the overall focus of this presentation will be on the March test preparations. If you have logged in with your learners as a teacher currently, please assist us by making sure that you take control of your learners, because you know if you've got learners around you, anything can happen, and we don't want anything that will disturb or disrupt the progress of our presentation. Let me also start with few house rules. This is an online presentation, and all your mics have been muted deliberately so that we don't have disruptions during the presentations. But if for whatever reasons you've got any suggestions, any inputs, any questions, you can put them on the chat box, or you can raise up your hand and ask that question later on after the presentation. This is not a long presentation. It's scheduled only for a maximum of an hour. Secondly, an attendance register has been put on the chat box. Please make sure that you fill in that attendance register. It was active from 2:30 and it will close at 4:30. So make sure that you sign, because that evidence of you being here in this platform is very, very crucial for my reporting later on. May I also again appreciate the fact that you managed to avail yourself, because this is our subject, and above all, this is our activity, this is our program, and the more you participate in these programs, the better, because I can tell you right now, 2025, we had an improvement in our subject results as a province, but we still want to improve more, and we believe that this platform will also ensure that we either sustain or even perform better. Without any waste of time, I'm now going to start with my presentation, and I believe everything is clear on your side, that side. Now, looking at the outline of our presentation, we are going to look at the importance of the control test as the first aspect of this presentation. We'll also look at the resources, because you cannot prepare for your learners, or your learners cannot prepare without being guided on which resources to use to prepare for the test, because we know the test is a very important SBA task. We'll also look at the scope. The scope is not like it's obvious, it's given. We'll also look at what in the scope your learners and even yourself as a teacher, because you've got time to prepare your learners for this assessment. And I believe you have already received the timetable. So by now you even know the date for the control test. So the scope will actually dive deeper into it so that you can prepare, and even your learners can prepare well for this assessment. We'll also look at the dates, or the date for the test, and the structure of this assessment. We'll touch also on some of the questions that are commonly asked. What are these questions that are commonly asked? And these questions will be from the ATP of term 1, meaning that these commonly asked questions will be questions that you would have covered the content thereof this term. And there's no way we cannot talk about essays, because essays, they form very important parts of our assessment. And we know essays, they carry a lot of marks. That's why we also have got to focus on essays, just to guide our learners, and also to guide you when you prepare your learners in as far as essays are concerned. And then lastly, we'll conclude our presentation. So that's briefly the outline of this presentation. Let's look at the importance. Why is it so important that we focus at this SBA task called a control test? The first thing, this test, it serves as a barometer, meaning that you as a teacher, you are actually going to be able to judge and gauge yourself whether what you have done from the beginning of the term up until the end of the term, you have done justice, whether there is more that you need to do. Because remember, this is the first term and you are still going for the second term, third term, and ultimately the last term where learners will be sitting for the end of the year examination. So it's important that you gauge yourself and check whether you are improving term by term. And it also gives you feedback as a teacher on your teaching practice. So this SBA task called control test is important because you are gauging yourself. Secondly, this task or the test itself, it contributes towards SBA. By now we know at the end of the term, after administering this task, your learners are going to be resulted. They have to get their term result. And this test is going to contribute toward that mark, that final mark. And besides that, this task or the test itself, it contributes towards the overall SBA mark of this learner at the end of the day, because come term 3, you must complete all SBA tasks for 2026. So this task will be part of that SBA. That's why it's so important to talk about this task, or even to discuss this task. I've already touched on this one. This forms part of term 1 progress report. Your learners will be resulted because of this task. And if for whatever reasons your learners don't get a chance to write the test, they will be on a back foot because they would have missed a very important task that contributes towards their term progress report. So it's important that we take this SBA task called control test very important, and that's why this platform is preparing you and your learners for this task. Let's look at the resources. Which resources have been used to prepare this task, or which resources are you expected to use when you prepare your learners, or even your learners have to use when they prepare themselves for this task? We know by now that everything that you are delivering in class right now, meaning that curriculum, that syllabus that you are delivering in class, is derived from CAPS. So CAPS remains the very first and very important resource. Secondly, you've got the annual teaching plan, the ATP. Currently, the ATP, when I look at the ATP, it says you must be wrapping up now your human resources. topic according to the ATP. So that ATP, it paces you. It tells you where you should actually be in as far as curriculum is concerned. So ATP also remains a resource and also a source, because this task is going to be developed based also on the ATP. The 2021 examination guidelines, they are also resources or source that you must also look at. When you go to class, you are deriving information from your examination guidelines to prepare your learners for the content that you are delivering. So this task also will also be set based on the 2021 examination guidelines. That's why this document remains a very important resource. You've got textbooks currently, and the textbook that is available for everyone currently, we know, is the DBE textbook, the state-owned textbook. And even though it may be lacking here and there, but it's a textbook and it's a resource and it has been approved. All that you have to do is to update the content in that textbook with the relevant and updated and current addendums from the marking, in fact, from the 2025 memo marking guidelines. So the textbooks remains a resource that you must use, but also make use of the addendums from the 2025 NSC exams marking guidelines. You've got notes. These notes also, you've got to update them based on the addendums, because the addendums, they are actually telling us that some of the content has been either taken out or it has actually been rephrased or enriched. So it's important that you take the addendums to update the notes so that your learners, they know that the content that they are delivering, in fact, the content that you are delivering as a teacher is up to date, because come end of the year, the addendums are going to be taken into account. So if you don't take addendums into account, you may still be using outdated notes or outdated information. Previous papers, they also remain resources. And my advice would be, when you look at previous papers, you must look at the past 3 years. So 2023, 2024, 2025, they are like your most recent previous papers and remain relevant resources. But that does not mean you cannot go even as far as 2022 and 2021. Those previous papers are crucial, but the most recent ones are the past 3 years previous papers. They are relevant and you can use information from there, because you'll never go wrong. And when I talk of previous papers, that is inclusive of even your May-June exams, NSC exams. So all those papers, they are available. If you don't have them, make sure that you contact your subject advisors to help you with that. Done about the resources. Let's now dive into the scope. When you look at the scope for this test, all relevant content topics as per the ATP. So it means this is a test. It's only one paper. The one task, it's a test, is going to be based on topics covered this term as per the annual teaching plan. And when you look at the ATP, It says you must have covered business environments, which is your impact of recent legislation on businesses and business strategies. According to the ATP, you should have covered that by now. You should have covered basically legislation, because strategies will be covered towards the end of the term, but it forms part of what your learners will be assessed on, what the test will be set on. So even business strategies, they form part of the scope for the test. The second broad topic is business operations. This is human resources, and I said, according to the ATP, you must still be busy with human resources right now. So human resources, the function. This topic remains part of the scope. Your learners will also be assessed on this topic. And then the last broad topic is business roles. Business roles, it's ethics and professionalism, and creative thinking and problem solving. These two subtopics, you still have got to cover them this term. And after covering them together with business strategies, you would have covered all the topics for the term, and the test will be based on all those topics: business environments, business operations, and business roles. Let's dive even deeper now into the scope. When you look at this test, question 1, it will be based on all those topics, meaning that it will be based on business environments, it will be based on business operations, it will be based on business roles. Those subtopics is legislation, business strategies, human resources, creative thinking, and problem solving, and professionalism and ethics. It's question 1, and it will be a question for 20 marks. And we're still going to talk about the structure, but by now we know that that is one question in section A, which is compulsory, is 20 marks. It will be based on all of those broad topics that I've highlighted. Question 2, we are still on the scope because you are going deeper. It will be based on business environments. And this question 2, for 20 marks, it will cover legislation and business strategies. That's question 2. Question 3, it will be business roles. And business roles, it will cover professionalism and ethics, and creative thinking and problem solving for 20 marks. That will be your question 3. And then question 4 is going to be miscellaneous topics. And miscellaneous topics will cover human resources, business strategies, and creative thinking and problem solving for 20 marks. That's your question 4 that forms part of section B. And then question 5, which will be an essay. It will be based on legislation for 40 marks. And then question 6, the last question, it will be business operations, and it will be based on human resources. So, and it will be for 40 marks. So I hope this scope, it gives you much detailed information as to what will be covered in the test. And sometime during the course of the month, you are also going to get a document from head office, but it will be sent to the subject advisors, which will later on be shared with you. And it is actually assessment information. It will actually be talking to what I've already touched on. So I hope the scope is more than enough for you to prepare and even prepare your learners in as far as the test is concerned. Let's come to the date and the structure. You must have received the March timetable. According to the March timetable, this test will be written on the 25th of March. The 25th of March, and all tests are expected to be written from 8 o'clock. So we know, because it's a test, in the case of business studies, it's 1 hour, 30 minutes. So we expect this test to start from 8 to 9:30, which is an hour. Let's look at the structure. The structure is pretty the same of what you know. The test is going to be divided into 3 sections, section A, B, and C. Section A, you have a section for 20 marks, which is compulsory, and is made up of multiple choice questions for 10 marks and match the columns for 10 marks, and maximum is 20 marks for this section. And learners are advised to spend not more than 20 minutes on this section. And as I was mediating the IM reports on Monday, I did highlight the fact that the observation from last year's performance is that our learners are doing pretty well in section A, and you must keep that good work up. It means there is something that you are doing right in as far as section A is concerned, because it looks like they no longer struggle with multiple choice or even matching columns. So continue to assess them informally in those type of questions to prepare them even further, because when they have 20 marks, already they stand a chance of passing, because with 20 marks, when they add marks from section B and section C, they've already passed, because this is only out of 100 marks. Section B, we are still on the structure of the paper. Section B is the choice section. Learners will be expected to choose 2 questions from 3 questions. These questions will be categorized, in fact, will be mainly made of scenarios. So it's also important to prepare your learners on how to go about answering scenario questions. And remember, scenario questions, they are testing application. So your learners can't just be asked simple and straightforward questions all the time. Scenario questions are applications. Take previous papers, there are scenario questions. Prepare your learners on how to answer those scenario questions using previous papers. So section B is 2 questions, each question carrying 20 marks. They must choose 2, but they'll be provided with 3. And the cognitive levels assessed in section B questions is from level 1 to level 6. It means all cognitive levels are tested there, whether they can recall, whether they can understand, whether they can evaluate, and so on. And then the last section is section C. Section C is essays. They'll be provided with 2 essays and expected to choose 1 from the 2. Like from the previous slide, I already made you aware that section C, question 5 is going to be legislation, question 6 is going to be human resources. They have to choose 1 question carrying 40 marks, and they are expected to spend not more than 30 minutes. And this section, it caters or it covers mostly level 3 to 6. That's why essay writing skills are important, because this question or this section is so important. Learners who are able to answer essays properly and collect marks, they stand a chance of making it. They stand a chance of doing well in the subject. And the total for the paper is 100. And like I said previously, the time is 1 hour 30 minutes, which is actually 90 minutes. So that's the structure of the paper, and you are well conversant with this structure. Let's now come to commonly asked questions. Not all, but just some of the questions that are commonly asked and how to go about advising your learners to answer. I've taken one topic per broad topic. For example, on business environments, I've taken legislation. Let's look at legislation. Legislation, one aspect of assessment in legislation is the impact. So it's important that your learners prepare the impact of legislation on any act. And what we have picked when it comes to impact, learners tend to struggle. Why? For example, if a question as given there as an example, discuss the impact of the National Credit Act on businesses is asked, you find learners trying to describe what is this act, or even trying to talk about the purpose of the act instead of discussing the impact, because the question is about the impact. And by now your learners should know that the moment you talk of impact, we're talking of advantages and disadvantages, or positives and negatives. And it, this actually advantages them because they can either answer the question presenting only positives, they will get their marks, or they can present only negatives and get their marks, or they can mix them. So it's actually an advantage with a question such as this one of the impact. But we see learners not doing well when it comes to a question assessing them on impact. And I'm saying to you, advise your learners and prepare them. Now, this is just an example on this question of impact on the National Credit Act. The advantage, for example, they must actually show how is this positively impacting on the business, how is this negatively affecting the business. For the positives or for the advantages, National Credit Act, it lowers bad debts, resulting in better cash flow. So when the business implements this act, the advantage for implementing this act is that it lowers bad debts. And if bad debts are being lowered, this will result in better cash flow. It's an advantage to the business. When you look at the disadvantage, for example, debt collection procedures are more complex and expensive. We know National Credit Act, it requires businesses to sort of try to take it slowly and communicate with the debtors and so on, because you have actually offered your services, or you have actually sold as a business on credit, and you've got debtors now, people who still have got to pay your business back. The act, it makes it, it is actually making it a bit difficult, because that debt collection procedure, the act is prescribing it to business, that you can't just from the word go, let's say from the word go, you are struggling with this data to collect what is due to you as a business. You can't just refer that data, to your lawyers or to whoever from the word go. There's a procedure. So it takes time, and because you've got to follow that procedure, you end up, sourcing the services of even another company to help you collect, which can be an added cost on your business. So that serves as a negative. So I'm just trying to explain these two facts to say to you, try by all means to encourage your learners to present a point that, convinces you as the marker that this is a negative impact, this is a positive impact, and make use of examples. Make use of examples. This will assist your learners. But the impact is what we see when it comes to legislation, learners not doing well, and advise your learners. And as you present, or because you have already taught this content, when you prepare your learners, when you revise, make sure that you go back and look at impact. Not only impact, remember with legislation, you've got purpose, you've got impact, and you've got also compliance that you must also look at for legislation. But I just focused on impact because learners stand a chance to benefit marks because they can either present negatives or even positives or even combine the two. Going to the next topic, still on business environments. Let's look at strategies. When you look at strategies, industrial tools, this is another topic where learners are actually struggling. And you take a topic like pestle factors, a question being asked like, explain how any pestle factor poses challenges to business. The misconception or errors that learners normally do. Learners will try to explain the pestle factors instead of actually answering the question of how they pose challenges to business, and by so doing they forfeit marks. So when you present this topic, make sure that you present it in such a way that your learners are able to answer it. For example, you take political as one of the factors of pestle. How does this pose a factor? Pose a challenge to businesses. You take point number one there. Some government policies may affect businesses. This is how this creates a problem or a challenge to business. You take, for example, right now, we are having an issue with US tariffs currently. The government, South African government, has got to come up with policies because whatever they are confronted with, it's political. They have to come up with some political decisions. Such political decisions may impact or affect the businesses because of what they are feeling outside. Technology. We know, technology, it keeps on changing. How does this factor pose a challenge? If the business is unable to cope and bring the latest technology, this poses a challenge because once it's a challenge, it says to the business, come up with a strategy to counteract that challenge. So this question on industrial tools, it's common, but learners tend not to answer it as expected and they lose marks. Maybe even yourself, how you present it, look at how you must present it and how it's been assessed even previously. You also have got resources which will guide you, but make use of examples will help you a lot. The next topic that is also common, it's on business operations, it's human resources, employment contract. This question is also common. On legal requirements or legalities of an employment contract. Learners, when they have to answer this question, you find they make a mistake of bringing the aspect of an employment contract instead of the legal requirements. And you must, when you present this, you must make sure that you clearly distinguish between the aspects and the legalities, because we want to know what makes a contract legal. What is it that makes it legal? The responses that we expect is that an employer and employee must both sign the contract and therefore makes the contract legally binding. And it's a requirement, it's a legal requirement that both parties must sign the contract. This fact is actually saying it's a legality. The employer and the employee must agree to any changes to the contract. It's a legality. That makes a contract legal because the two have agreed to changes. There is no party that will just make changes without the other one knowing. The employer must allow the employee to go through or to thoroughly read the contract before it is signed. It's a legal requirement. It's a legality. This contract, an employment contract, to be legal again, it may not contain any requirements that are in conflict with the BCEA, because we know BCEA is an act. So all these are legalities. Make sure that when you present this, you present it in such a way that your learners are able to do justice to that. The next topic is on business roles, creative thinking and problem solving. This question is also common. The benefits of creative thinking or the advantages of creative thinking in the workplace. Learners will try to explain what is creative thinking. Remember the concept, creative thinking, we know it. But the question wants now learners to go further to say, how does this benefit the business? How does the business benefit from creative thinking? That's the question. They should not make that mistake of trying to explain what creative thinking is all about. They must actually come up with the advantages. What is it that the business stand to benefit when they do this creative thinking in the workplace? For example, productivity will increase. It's a benefit to the business, as management or employees may quickly generate multiple ideas, which utilizes time and money more effectively. So you can hear it's a benefit to the business. Managers will be better leaders as they will be able to handle or manage changes positively and creatively. Complex business problems will definitely be able to be solved because of creativity. So make sure that you present it well and you advise your learners accordingly when they have to answer a question such as this under business roles. It's also common. And then the last topic that I want to focus on business roles is ethics and professionalism. Application of King Code principles. And in this instance, I've just highlighted accountability. Learners, when they have to answer this question, they want to explain what this King Code principle is all about. And that's not the question. The question is about application. How can the business apply this King Code principle called accountability? The responses that we are expecting from learners will include, amongst others, the following: that there must be regular communication between management and the stakeholders like shareholders. That fact is actually talking to application. Regular communication between the two. Then the business will be applying this accountability code. If the company appoints internal and external auditors to audit financial statements, they will then be applied. This is how King Code principle of accountability is being implemented, in fact, applied. The business should be accountable and responsible for their decisions or their actions. That talks to accountability. So make sure that you advise your learners and you present this content clear to them, and you also make use of examples. All these will make sure that your learners are better prepared for the test. And then approach to essay writing. There is no way we cannot talk about essay writing, because like I said when I started, essay writing has got to be focused on all the time, because essays, they form part of assessment and they carry a lot of marks. Insight. You cannot teach without making your learners aware of marks for insight. And insight is made up of those components of LASSO. L being for layout. It really pains us when learners have an essay without a structure. Make sure that your learners, they know for an essay, it has got to be an essay with a structure. It has got to have an introduction. It has got to have a conclusion. And they must literally write the word introduction and the word conclusion. And they must write underneath those headings. If that is the case, they get 2 marks for that. Analysis and interpretation. Your learners must be able to break the question down. And if in their essay, they have made use of all the headings used as in the essay, they stand to get 1 mark for that. By the headings, I mean, by now we know all essays have got bullets. Those bullets are basically instructions. Instruction number 1, 2, 3, 4. If in the essay, they have broken down the essay according to those bullets, and they've got those headings according to how the question is being asked, they already have got 1 mark for that. And then if they score 16 and above in the essay, they qualify for 2 marks for analysis and interpretation. Synthesis is relevancy. All that they bring into their essay should be relevant to what is being asked. And my observation and experience thus far is that by now, it's very rare that we have learners struggling with synthesis. Most of the time, learners, they qualify for synthesis because what they present is relevant to what is being asked. So, but whenever they bring anything irrelevant, now they get penalized, because that's when they will have a minus S, or they end up even having 0 for synthesis. And then lastly, it's originality. Originality is examples. We want to know, is there evidence of one example in any 2 of the 4 sub questions, not older than 2 years, which are based on recent information, current trends, and developments. When I presented on Monday, I said also we are beginning to pick up and also observe a positive practice from learners. They are beginning now to make use of examples in their essays, and you must continue to assist them and poke them more on originality, because once they bring originality, it means they are bringing life to the content that they learn in class. And remember, we've got 4 bullets. Each bullet, they must bring an example that is relevant to that bullet. But here, for them to get 2 marks, it should be 1 example in any 2 of the 4. And I'm going to take you through just an example of originality. With originality, and I presented this on Monday also when I was mediating the IM reports. You take an example. This is just an example that I'm giving you. You take business environments and you take the topic strategies, business strategies, and you take a question like how personal factors pose challenges to business. A practical and relevant and current example will be what is currently happening, the US tariffs that are hitting South African companies. And an example is the motor industry. Currently, we know that South African factories such as BMW, Mercedes-Benz, they are exporting cars or vehicle and parts to the US every year. And what is currently happening? The tariffs had they have actually hit South Africa very hard, because I can tell you, I was driving through not so long ago, and I observed that we used to have BMW here in Bloemfontein. It has actually closed, and you can see that this is now hitting hard on the motor industry, because the new tariffs, they mean that companies are now facing higher production costs, because that is actually making it harder for companies in South Africa to compete, with companies that are not facing such tariffs. So this is a typical and practical and current and relevant example when it comes to a question of how this pose challenges. And a personal factor here that can be applicable is economic factor, because tariffs, they are economic in nature. Or it can also be political, because you see, US is taking political decisions. When you take a look at how those tariffs were uh, imposed, they were imposed politically, and it will inform political also decisions by by governments or by countries, which will also impact business negatively. So this is how this will pose a challenge. It's just an example of originality. You've got so many. Think of originality in other topics. Let's take an example of an essay. This is just an example of a previous essay. The basic aim of Skills Development Act of 1998 is to expand on the knowledge and competencies of the labor force. SETAs were established to facilitate the implementation of the SDA. Businesses are expected to oblige with this act and be fully conversant with its requirements. That is a preamble of an essay. Write an essay on the Skills Development Act in which you address the following aspects. 1. Outline the role of SETAs in supporting the Skills Development Act. Explain the purpose of the Skills Development Act. Discuss the impact of the Skills Development Act on businesses, and recommend ways in which businesses can comply with this act. And all this is for 40 marks. This is a typical essay. It's an example of an essay. How should your learners go about answering this essay? Your learners should actually come up with what we call a mind map. Mind map, it's allowed. They can even have that in their script, but they will not be provided with marks for that. But a mind map, it actually gives an indication that a learner is taking time to prepare for this essay. In the middle there, this essay, the theme of the essay, the question is based on SDA, Skills Development Act. And the first bullet wanted them to outline the role of SETAs. So role of SETAs should be the first subtopic in their essay. It means they must make sure that they talk about role of SETAs as their first subheading. Secondly, purpose of SDA. They must also have a subheading on purpose of Skills Development Act. Thirdly, they must focus on the impact. And remember, we spoke about impact earlier on, that it's now advantages and disadvantages, or negatives and positives. And lastly, they must also have a subheading on ways businesses can comply with the act. This will help them to have those subheadings. And if they have subheadings, remember, they already have 1 mark for analysis, because they have broken down the question nicely to show understanding. And if they score more than 16, they already have got 2 marks. And by so breaking the question down relevantly, it also helps them to do what? To be relevant. It means they will also get 2 marks for synthesis. So it's easy for learners to score marks in an essay. Encourage them or train them in as far as essay writing is concerned by making use of mind map. And then we have also seen that learners are struggling with introduction. When you look at introduction, remember the first bullet was about learners coming up with Skills Development Act as bullet number 1 in the essay. The first bullet must actually talk to, in fact, the first introductory statement must talk to the bullet in the question. The second introductory statement must talk to the second bullet. What does that mean? It means gone are the days where learners can come up just with generic introductory statements. When you read this statement here, it talks about, the first bullet was about the role of SETAs. Here is the introductory statement. It says, a SETA is a vocational skills training organization that identifies skills shortages that are needed in different industries. Because the first bullet was about the role of SETAs. The second bullet was talking about the purpose of Skills Development Act. And here is the bullet talking about the Skills Development Act was introduced to address the imbalances of the past. The third bullet was about the impact. Skills Development Act enables South Africans to gain access to skills training opportunities that have long-term benefits. This talks to the impact. And lastly, the last bullet is about compliance. Businesses that comply with Skills Development Act are able to create a good public image and address skills shortages in the South African workplace. When you look at all these 4 bullets, they are relevant to what is being asked, because what is being asked is role of SETAs, it's the purpose of the act, its impact, and also compliance. So when you train your learners on introduction, encourage them to come up with statements that are linked to the bullets, meaning that are talking to what is being asked. The same applies to the conclusion, because learners are struggling with conclusion. The first concluding statement, it talks to the role of SETAs. Businesses should register with SETAs for training programs that are accredited by the South African Qualification Authorities. The second concluding statement, it talks to the purpose. The SDA makes provision for the establishment and the effective functioning of SETAs. The third concluding statement, it talks to the impact. The Skills Development Act plays an important role in ensuring that South African workforce is skilled and encourage employees' participation in lifelong learning. The last bullet, it talks to compliance. Businesses are encouraged to comply with this act in order to avoid penalties and an increased financial burden on businesses. So the moment they conclude with statements that are relevant to what is being asked, they will get their full marks when it comes to conclusion. So make sure that you prepare and you train your learners on how to craft introduction and conclusion. And it's 2 marks. And these 2 marks is given. And we expect them to actually pocket those 4 marks, 2 marks each. And still on approach to essay writing is the breakdown. When you look at the breakdown, introduction is 2 marks, conclusion is 2 marks, role of SETAs is 12, purpose of SDA was 10, impact was 12, compliance was 12. When you add all the marks from introduction to conclusion in the marking guideline, you find that adds up to a maximum of 50 marks. Is this not an advantage? It is, because a learner who can come up with the relevant introduction, but who cannot come up with all the facts for the role of sitters, or even the role of, the purpose, can come up with all the facts, they will still stand a chance to score maximum of 40, because this 50 gets reduced to a maximum of 40 marks. That is also inclusive of the layout. So it means this is actually reduced to a maximum of 32. So it's an advantage because learners, even if they don't address or they don't have all the facts, but they've addressed all the aspects, they stand a chance of scoring a maximum of 32, and we add the marks for layout, which is 8 marks, they get their 40 marks. On Monday, I said there's a learner who scored 40 out of 14 in essay last year. It's possible, it's doable. So just make sure that you encourage your learners on essay writing. Even in terms of assessment, you assess them informally on essay writing. You can even encourage them when they sit for the test, they can start with the test. With the essay, for as long as they number correctly, they can start with an essay, because already they are fighting for 40 marks with an essay. So learners who do well in essays, they stand a chance to do well in the subject and in the assessment that has been asked. In conclusion, I want to say to you, good luck with all your preparations for term 3. Good luck with the March test. Make sure that your learners are ready for the test, and make sure that you even study and read the timetable properly, because sometimes you find learners or even school saying, but we missed the date, whereas the timetable was sent to them. Make sure that everything is set on for the assessment. I want to take this moment to again thank you for availing yourself for this very important preparation. I'm now going to open up this time for comments or even questions, and also encourage everybody to sign the attendance register. Make sure that you sign, because it is still open until 4:30. With those few words, I'm going to stop sharing and bid everybody farewell. Subject advisors who are in the meeting, is there anything that you want to say? I can see some people are saying the attendance register link should be sent again. I've sent it again on the chat box. Make sure that you sign the attendance register. So without any waste of time, let me thank you and declare this meeting officially adjourned. You'll get the recording of this presentation, and with this recording you can play it again, you can share it with your learners as you prepare them for the March test. This meeting is now standing adjourned, and I'm going to stop the recording immediately hereafter.